Hello and welcome back to the Educated Collins Snap channel. How you doing? So today we're going to be completely breaking down M.O.D.O.K or M.O.D.O.K, whatever you guys want to pronounce them. But basically, I I did a first impressions, and now I think enough time has passed. A new season just started. What do I actually think about this season pass card? Should you buy it? Should you build around it? And some recommendations. So even regardless of whether I think you should buy it or not, I will also have some example deck builds for you to play around, test, see if you like. But let's get started. So first things first, right? We have M.O.D.O.K in the season pass. On reveal, discard your hand. My first impressions was that this was a card to keep out for, but I wouldn't day one purchase it, right? I thought this could end up being a little bit niche, and wouldn't be a staple like Silver Surfer, a staple like Zabu. I do think that turned out to be pretty accurate. I wouldn't say like this card is dominating the meta or is even like a huge part of the meta game, but it is something you might see from time to time and does have some playability. So it is a card that works. It is a card that is strong, but it's not super dominating. And it does have weaknesses in the current meta game right now. Like Leech kind of messes with this, and its plays can be pretty telegraphed in what you're going to do and how much power you're going to have. So you do have to be a little bit careful if you are going to play it. So overall, my recommendation, if you are financially conscious, I'd still say you can skip this season pass overall. You're not going to be losing too much power or too many options, right? The deck builds with this card is pretty limited. So I think if you just only care about progression, just don't only care about the power of a card, for season pass, which is what I do, I'd say this is pretty skippable. Now, does that mean this card is bad? No, I actually think this deck does have some good plays, some good power output, and is a pretty fun deck to play. So if you just want to try something different, you want to try your season pass that you bought, I do think we do have a couple of good options that do exist in the game. However, my recommendation is that this is skippable, but if you always buy a season pass, then you're gonna have this card. So there are still some good decks that you can try. So first deck list, I would say is maybe my favorite, but that doesn't mean it's the best. Um, I wouldn't say any of these are like going to make you climb to infinite instantly, but I do think they do have good plays and they are playable. Just wouldn't say like they have my approval, like the Sandman deck, right? Like that's not really what we're doing here. However, I do think this is pretty good, pretty nice. This one is kind of utilizing the Morbius Mystique combo for a ton of power. You also have Collector for a way to get a ton of power early. Then you have the Colin Wing plus Swarm combo. I think that's a pretty big staple in M.O.D.O.K decks just because it's very consistent if you can get those pieces going in terms of like giving you a lot of options, giving you a lot of room, let you decide where you want those swarms to go. And then I guess the unique angle is the card generation. Ask give Agent 13, Agent Coulson, and then Moon Girl, right? So this kind of just refills your hand, keeps your hand ready to be discarded completely, buffs up your Morbius and your Mystique very well. I will say it's very likely you might do turn 6 M.O.D.O.K, just because if on turn 5 you do something like Morbius Mystique, well then you get to get the payoff on the final turn. So you don't have to play something like Apocalypse last turn. You can also just play the setup on 5 and then the payoff on 6. So one thing I will say, you can replace Agent Coulson for Dracula. I think I prefer the Agent Coulson just because you don't really need Dracula, even though Dracula is really good, a lot of times on 4 you end up doing something like a 2-drop plus colon wing to proc the swarm. So it ends up being like you already have things to do in the early game, very likely. So I haven't really felt that I needed the Dracula, even though Dracula is a very good card, and I wouldn't be surprised if you want to play that one instead. Now, next up, we have another variant of the deck style. This one does have Dracula in it. Instead of the card generation aspect, we're going for the big turn 6 swings, right? So here we have She-Hulk, we have Infinite. Um, if you're playing Dracula, right, Infinite's a very good target. We have the Black Cat just for something, just for discard pieces. It's not really something you really focus on, but it is there. We have the Sunspot because we're going to be doing something with She-Hulk. You need a way to get some power in those skip turns. And then we still have the other pieces, the Morbius. We don't have Mystique this time since Morbius Mystique is a little bit inconsistent in that you're not always going to have that Mystique into the Morbius. So we took that out. And we do have just like turn 4, you'll play your Dracula. Turn 5, you'll pass. Turn 6, you'll do something like She-Hulk, M.O.D.O.K, and then your swarms or something like that. Like that would be very optimal. And then hope that um you hit Infinite, right? Maybe you'll have Infinite in your hand. Maybe you'll have Apocalypse, right? That kind of thing. So that one's a little bit hard to fully flesh out, but that's kind of the idea we have going here. Next up, we do have this one. This one's more of a high roll discard composition because we're running Wong now. So our strategy here this time is to really pump the Morbiuses to make them huge and gigantic. So the Wong lets you do that very easily. You play the Wong, then you play the M.O.D.O.K, and you get the discard twice in a row, and that allows you to get the swarms discarded again and again, and lets you get the Apocalypse discarded again and again. And then the Helicarrier, if you have that instead, lets you discard the Helicarrier and then the 3 cards that you get from it. So you just get a lot of discards with the Wong into the M.O.D.O.K synergistic play. So that's the idea. If you don't have that, you can just play Dracula. But definitely Wong has a big power spike into this game plan. So that's another way you can maneuver around, make it work. But you can see like all the decks are very samey. There are a lot of like these core cards you need. I think you need Morbius. I think you need Cullen Wing Swarm and a lot of them. Dracula, Apocalypse, right? Like there's a lot of pieces that don't really change from deck to deck. But this is kind of how I would be looking at building it. A good starting point for you to design around. And then the last one we have, this one's a Lockjaw variant. It's also the Invisible Woman Hela variant, right? So this one I don't recommend. I recommend this one, but not the full only Invisible Woman variation because that one is a little too telegraphed. Even though you can do something like Magneto final turn to um, remove it away, uh, there's just too many times people will just have the answer into that particular game state. So here we have 2 ways. We do have the Invisible Woman still, but now you have another way of summoning big cards out of Lockjaw, especially with Colon Wing and Swarm. If you can get that combo off, you get the 0 mana swarms. Those can go straight into the Lockjaw and really start pulling out your big thing. So, and you're not locked into the uh, what's it called? You're not locked into the play Invisible Woman, play M.O.D.O.K, play Hela game plan. You can do that, but now you can also go Lockjaw pulls out your, your Infinite. Lockjaw pulls out your Marvel. So you have a little bit more room in terms of like ways to have huge plays. So this one's a little bit more casino style, but it can work. It does have those big payouts. It's really fun to play when it does go off. So I think if you like that play style, this is definitely one that you can utilize. Obviously, right, as we've talked, I do want to reiterate these aren't going to instantly win all the matches. There's a really big weakness for these discard compositions right now, that it gets destroyed by a leech. Um, I wouldn't say Sandman is like the biggest issue, but leech is definitely a problematic tool, and a lot of people are running leech right now. So since Electro Sandman leech is like a very common play, you'll see a lot of leech. So you do have to be careful. But if you aren't seeing a ton of leech, this is definitely a fun deck and can work, right? I'm not gonna say it wins all the time, but I did want to have a video just fully closing out the chapter of M.O.D.O.K or M.O.D.O.K, just because I have the first impression video, but I don't have the, oh, this is what it actually turned out to be, right? So, because my first impression could definitely be wrong. So, just really wanted to talk about it, give some example builds. Final words: you don't have to buy this pass, right? So, if you're asking, should I get this pass? You don't have to. So, but it is a fun pass. It is a good card. It's just not a card that you're gonna have to be running in a lot of your decks. It fits a niche, and it's a good niche, but it's not an essential niche like some of the others were at the time. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Hope you guys learned something. Hopefully you have a couple new decks to try if you want to see if they work for you. And I'll see you in the next one. All right, one thing I did want to mention, that this second deck that I build, right? Like I'm looking at it again, like I know like this is random, but I'm like, how do you get this Infinite down, right? Because if you play the M.O.D.O.K, you're gonna mill the Infinite. So you kind of, so how do you top the deck this? Because you're gonna have the Chavez here. So I'm just like thinking, like, is this deck even make sense from like a theoretical standpoint? And I'm not like fully sure. I definitely like that you can go She-Hulk, M.O.D.O.K, and get that power off. But aren't you just kind of relying on the Apocalypse and not the Infinite? I know this is like, hey, this is your build, Collins. And I agree with you. I'm just like, huh, is that correct? So yeah, maybe this one, scrap this one. But the other three I think are pretty fine. Anyways, take care. Have a nice rest of your day.